It's time to accelerate. Hey friends, this is Andy. Welcome to episode 505 of Accelerate, the sales podcast of record, where I hold in-depth conversations with today's leading experts in sales, marketing, and leadership 6 days a week. If you like the show, it would really help us out if you subscribed, left a review for us. You can do this all with the podcast app on the phone you're using to listen to this podcast, so please go ahead, hit pause, quickly subscribe, leave your review, and then come right back. We'll be waiting for you. Joining me on this show for the first time is Scott Ingram. Scott's a practicing salesperson in his day job, and he moonlights as the host of a podcast called Sales Success Stories, in which he interviews people who sell for a living. Sort of unusual, I guess. So I asked Scott to come on the show because he's really a smart guy about sales. I mean, Scott and I met for the first time a few months ago at a conference in San Francisco. We ended up having a great talk about sales, and I asked Scott if he'd come on Accelerate and share some of the insights that he's picked up from the sales professionals that he interviewed on his show. So let's get right into it. Scott, welcome to Accelerate.
Happy to be here, Andy.
My pleasure. So we met, a month ago in San Francisco? I think it was.
That's about right.
Yeah, it was. We had a great conversation. That was a lot of fun. So obviously, so it's like, I got to get Scott on the show, make sure he's on. So, another good conversation here today.
I think we will. I'm looking forward to it.
All right. So here's opening question. This is becoming my new opening question for guests. Is, in your mind, what's the single biggest challenge today facing sales reps?
Overwhelm. I think that there's just a lot of responsibility, a lot of confusion and tactics and ideas, and just so much that needs to get done, and so many different ideas for how to get it done. That it's really a challenge to figure out what are the right things and how do you maintain focus in a very, very noisy environment that is sales today.
Well, do you think it's a drag on their personal productivity?
I think productivity for sure. I work on my own personal productivity and have for years, and work incredibly hard just to tame all of the notifications and things that come at you, right? So I have virtually all notifications turned off on my phone. I don't get a notification when I get an email.
Right.
I don't do Facebook, period. I gave up on Facebook a couple of years ago just because it was such a time suck. I think there's just so many traps and ways that we're being pulled, and it's not just sales, right? It's humans today.
Exactly.
There's a lot to distract us. And so to be able to stay focused, and that's the challenge that we have in working with our clients and opening doors, is they're dealing with the same things, and we have to find creative ways to break through that noise. So it's the overwhelm of everybody.
Okay. All right. So you sound a lot like my buddy Jill Conrath when you talk about overwhelm. She talks about that as well. So what's the one behavior then they should master in order to deal with that?
Ooh, good question. Turn stuff off. Really learn how to focus. A lot of the guests that I've talked to on my show, they've adopted I only check email a few times a day, and they're in a much more proactive stance rather than being reactive.
Yeah, I'd like to put monitors on those people that say they only do it a few times a day.
It's interesting, and I haven't tested any of those folks, but every now and then I'll get those emails that say, "Oh, I only check email twice a day," and I'll send them a note and get an immediate response. I'm like, maybe you're not doing what you say you're doing.
Yeah, because they talk about millennials. There's a category they call them super checkers, and they find the super checkers are checking their phone more than 50 times a day.
And I think that's very, very common. I mean, I've been in that place.
Well, I mentioned it to my son, who's a millennial, and he laughed. He said, "Was that only a day 50? Or an hour?" I said, "Yeah, they said a day, but that sounds awfully low for me for somebody to be considering somebody a super checker, as they only check their phone 52 times a day. But I guess if you got a job, maybe that constrains you to some degree." But think about that. All right, so let's talk about your show, which again, tell people the name of your podcast.
Yeah, so the show is the Sales Success Stories podcast, and it's really something that I came to. I was really trying to scratch my own itch. I've been a large consumer of sales content over the years, but I've always been frustrated by the fact that there's some great stuff out there. I mean, Jill Conrath has got great things, and Jeb Blunt and Andy Paul, and all of these folks have written some
Thank
great books.
Goodness you mentioned that.
Well,
would have been a very short interview otherwise. Yeah, go ahead.
But what was missing for me is what the very best salespeople are doing. Where are those folks? And it's interesting. I was joking with a guest of mine, with Robbie Siegel, who really super interesting story. He's an individual contributor now, after having been a VP of sales for about 10 years, and just made a very, very conscious choice to go back into the field, wanted to reduce his travel, wanted to spend more time with his family. In a 2-year period, got to a place where he was the number one contributor in the organization, did something like $6.4 million in sales. And he joked with me. He's like, well, of course, Scott, like none of us are writing books because we don't have time, right? We're too busy selling. So the goal of my show was really to get directly to the folks who are actually having the most success. And I only interview the number one individual contributor in a particular organization, or if it's a very, very large organization, I'll settle for the top 1%. And it's been absolutely enlightening. I'm having a blast. As you know, this podcasting thing is an awful lot of fun.
It is. It is. Yes, as I speak, as today, the day we're recording this, we published our 450th episode. So yes, I must like it. Otherwise, what the heck am I doing?
Yeah, you're about that's some order of magnitude more than me, and I will never catch up at my bi-weekly pace. But it is still a blast.
All right, so we're going to talk about some things that you've learned that are sort of the most consistent traits among the top sales professionals you've interviewed. So let's sort of take these in order. One is they have a belief in their solution and the value they bring. Meaning if it's not best in class, they don't sell it. Now I found that kind of interesting because I'm going to have sort of a contrarian view on this, is that when someone says that to me, it's bordering on complacency. If it's not the best.
Complacency how?
Well, because, the things that are the best, oftentimes they don't take as much effort to sell. I can only be bothered to sell the best in class because, if I'm trying to sell something new, something that's unproven, something that's trying to become the best in class, I got to get down in the trenches. That's guerrilla warfare. I've got to extremely tactical. That's really different than saying, if it's not the best in class, I don't sell it.
Yeah, and I think that this is really just how it's the passion that comes across for their own solution. Because I think if you look at the different people who have said that, they're not necessarily working for the number one company in their space, or the one that would be perceived as the easy sale. I think it's, again, just that deep belief that what we have to offer, or the fit, or the value that they're able to bring to their clients, that they believe that. And I think that really comes across. I think that when you're buying, you have sort of a sixth sense about those things, whether you recognize it or not. And if somebody doesn't believe in their solution, I don't think that they're going to have a lot of success, because people will sniff that out one way or another.
Yeah, well, I think there's two ways, absolutely, to take that statement. And I was sort of reacting because, my experience in Silicon Valley and the tech business has been that, there are lots of people that are very fortunate to be in the right place at the right time. Mm-hmm. And we're selling solutions that were, the, 1 in a million thing that just took off like crazy. And suddenly, became the smartest kids in the class through no fault of their own, or no contribution of their own, let's say. And when we talk about, then you run into these people afterwards, and it's all about, the subsequent deals. Well, I'm going to sell best in class, and what they're really saying is they're looking for that one that's going to be the next, one that skyrockets, right? So, but I also understand you have to have passion for what you're selling, and people underestimate that. I mean, I think that that's sort of the other way of interpreting what they're saying is you have to believe in the value you deliver, even if it's not best in class, even if there's something, somebody has a broader solution, but what you offer is maybe a little more point solution, but you got to believe in it. Otherwise, go find something else.
Yeah, well, and I think the belief is also twofold. It's not just in their solution, but I think there's also a belief in themselves and a level of confidence and trust in their process and the value that they bring to their clients, and really just their own ability to execute. So it's just an overall level of confidence that I think comes across in its entirety.
So how do you discern that confidence from bravado?
That's a great question. I don't think I can answer that. That's for the buyer. That's for the buyer to decide if you've gone over the line and you're the bull in the china shop, because it's absolutely a fine line.
Yeah, I mean, again, a little bit of contrarian view, because the people I knew that were the best and who are the best, for them, the primary driver was, there was a belief in themselves, but part of that, what that belief in themselves drove was them looking for the most interesting challenge. And that could be best in class. It doesn't necessarily have to be best in class, but that's what drove those people that I knew. The peers that I came in, or the younger people that I've coached and so on, in primarily in tech business, but not exclusively. Yeah, what's the next big challenge? I want that challenge, and the confidence says is, look, give me the challenge. I'm going to be able to meet it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So to me, that was sort of, as I was thinking about the traits you sort of laid out, is that's the one for me that stood out among all the others, people I knew, is give me the challenge.
And again, it's a level of confidence, right? So if it's not best in class, don't sell it, right? That was one comment, but I think there is that much broader theme of just the confidence all the way around. Mm-hmm. And you're absolutely right, though. It is the right thing, right? Because if you're just an egomaniac and kind of bull in the china shop, that has the opposite impact of what you're really looking to accomplish, I think, oftentimes.
Yeah. Well, and there's certainly a cadre of people in any industry who are sort of hired guns, mercenaries. And we see it more and more over the last 10, 15 years. Job tenure sort of decreases in the sales space. People come in, try to milk it for all the money they can, hop to the next one. That's not always, those aren't always the best people, right? I mean, best people is really contextual as far as I'm concerned. Is I've seen companies sort of hire the mercenaries, and they might get a little bump, but then the mercenaries move on, and what happens to them?
Yeah, well, and I think if you look at the lifetime value of their customers, right, I think you have to look beyond just the initial contract that type of individual brings in and look at the lifetime quality of that kind of customer. Do they stick around? Are they happy? Are they referenceable? Or do they make referrals? Like that's the real value.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. All right. So next one you talk about was shared trait among your top performers was a focus on their client and deeply caring about their results.
And I think it's really just simply that. I've been struck by how much, just in general, these conversations really just smash the stereotypical negative sales stereotype of what the very top performers are. And I have found them to be super passionate and caring about their clients' results and have really a vested interest in where that goes. And I think particularly folks that have been in the industry, in the same industry for a long time, and are able to continue to ride that, because just like you said, with tenure decreasing, if you're able to build those kinds of relationships and deliver those kinds of results for your clients, then you benefit from them buying from you again when they're in a same or higher level role in another company, and their friends and everything else that kind of comes from that. So it's been really interesting to see just how caring they are, and not seeing this as, you're a transaction, you're a means to an end, because I've got a sales record to crush.
Yeah. So to me, the difference is you look at selling as a service, right? Service you provide to somebody.
Exactly right.
And one of the clues I look for, and and I wrote about this in one of my books, is that, yeah, I don't want somebody that's going to say, well, I'm selling to someone, but, we're working with this client, right? It's a collaborative effort, and
Yeah,
it's not.
you're stealing all my thunder, Andy. I have some things written down for your rapid fire answers later that sound an awful lot like that.
I had no idea. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to steal your thunder, but I think that is absolutely true. Is for me, looking at myself, not to lump myself into that category if I can, of the top performers, is for me it's always about the service that you're providing, and I think one of the other sort of representations you see about that is and how you can tell somebody's not truly service oriented is they're a little too concerned about who's getting the credit.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And to me, that's always the big clue, right? If you get somebody that says, yeah, that was mine, or I did this, when it was really a team effort, let's say.
Yeah. And when isn't it a team effort? Well,
exactly. But in some cases, more team than others. But I mean, it's always a team effort. And so if somebody's just trying to hog the credit, that's a problem. They probably have client issues.
Yeah.
Okay, so next one on your list was surrounding themselves with the best and understanding and growing themselves. So it's sort of two there. So first of all, surrounding themselves with the best. Now, in this case, what do you think they meant by the best?
Yeah, well, I think this comes across in a couple of different ways. I often will talk about the things that they do when they come into a new sales role and how they lay that early foundation for success. And a large majority talk about how they will figure out who the top people in the organization are, build relationship with them, understand what it is they're doing, right? What is the playbook? What's working? And then in many cases, I had a great interview with Kyle Gutzler, who is at PayScale, wrote a pretty great article on LinkedIn about how he doubled his sales results in a single year. Mm-hmm. And a lot of it was just looking at what those top people were doing, taking the pieces that he thought were most effective and fit him the best, and then applying a multiple to it. Like, okay, well, if I do twice as much of that, can I see better results? And absolutely, he ended up on top. So that's one piece, I think, in kind of that early on. But then it's bringing together, and Kyle, again, I just kind of the best example of this. He set up sort of a monthly brunch on a Friday with the top performers in the organization as just a way to continue to learn from each other, and something that, in so many ways, what I'm trying to create, I've heard my entire career, right? It was the Jim Rohn saying that you are the average of the 5 people that you surround yourself with. But when you think about the people that are at the very, very top, that's a really hard group to surround yourself with just based on availability alone. Mm-hmm. So in a lot of ways, what I'm trying to do with my show is create that experience at scale. So here's a way that you can have the best in your ear and understand the ins and outs of what they're doing on a daily basis and what they feel is making them successful in a way that you can continue to listen to that and just absorb that without necessarily having to hunt down that individual and figure out a way to get time on their calendar.
Well, I think there's another aspect of this, and I've been talking about this more recently on the show, is, they surround themselves with the best. They understood what it is they had to do, but also the point you made that was so critical is how do they apply that to what they're doing, their strengths, leverage their strengths. And so often now we see in sales, more tightly prescribed processes. And so the conundrum is the top performers stretch the rules, right? And they sort of get accommodated because they are succeeding. But part of it was they took a risk at some point. It worked for them. And then they were then to show management, look, I'm doing things a little bit differently, but we're getting results out of it. But what happens is I think that sort of the middle, what I call the middle class within the sales organization, they just don't feel that freedom to take those risks. And, as a consequence, they sort of consign themselves to being average.
Well, and Andy, that was the most fascinating part to me of the conversation that we had together in San Francisco, and you talking about how while sales is supposed to be this innovative space, it seems like everybody is running the exact same playbook. And I think maybe the broadest theme of all, because there's definitely no set recipe with the individuals I've talked to. You can't. It's actually hard to go find these consistent themes. But I think the very most consistent one is there is a pretty strong, deep level of self-awareness, and they know what their strengths are, and they are leveraging and maximizing them pretty handily. And I think a lot of that is being creative and finding ways that aren't the standard approach that everybody else is doing. And that's why everybody's so frustrated with all the crappy emails they're getting, and all, just the buyer experience is kind of rough these days, just because everybody's doing more of what's not working.
Yeah. But I mean, you look at it is so we have these incredible tools that are available to sales organizations, and they're using it, to your point, to drive a bunch more activity, but screaming for somebody to do it differently and do it better, even if it's just one person in there. Because as you know, I talk to a lot of people on the show. I have this conversation increasingly now with people. How do we encourage people to take risks? And that's anathema to a lot of managers these days, because risk doesn't look good when they line up their metrics.
Right. And it's a big part of the reason why I thrive in much smaller organizations. When I went to work for Eloqua, that was a great thing. When I found myself as one of 130,000 employees at Oracle, not such a great thing for me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you weren't the only one. I mean, there was a number of people that fit that same thing. And so, part of it's finding what your comfort level is, but also organizations, big organizations, even but we're seeing it now increasingly in smaller organizations, is this is what you got to do today, right? Here's the numbers, here's the calls, here's the dials, here's the conversations, it's all laid out. And I had a conversation with one guest on the show that was talking about a situation where, trying to coach people to adhere to the program, even though they might be hitting quota or even beating quota. It was almost like it was being advocated that, but this person's a disruption because they're not with the program, even though they're succeeding.
Right.
And I've heard at the Topo conference we're at, I heard a conversation or a presentation the year before where basically someone made that case, is that those people, though they may be successful, are not cultural fits, and therefore we're going to get rid of them. I was like, I understand the importance of culture. Absolutely. I've worked a number of organizations where it was vital to our success. But was what the person doing to get business so at odds with the culture, otherwise known as the process, that you would terminate them?
Yeah. Well, and it's, I'd be so curious to see some type of study on those types of companies. Right. If we're going to build the mold, and if people don't fit in the mold, then we're going to get rid of them. And this is the process we're going to run. How successful are those organizations really? And what does their turnover look like? I can't imagine that that's a very fun place to work, where, you're a factory worker at that point. That, to me, that's certainly not why I came to sales, right? I came to sales because this is a really creative, innovative, fun, unique, get to do different things. I'm not interested in working on the Henry Ford production line.
Well, but isn't there a danger of us sort of replicating that production line environment in some of the inside sales environments that we have these days?
Well, I think that was the point that you were making. I think we already have. I think we already have. And if you look at those metrics, I would guess that they're degrading over time in terms of your conversion. And so what do? You just keep adding more people to it? You add more pressure to have more dials and more touches and piss the market off even more? Like, we're going in the wrong direction.
Well, yeah, and I think you see in certain companies that are maybe high growth, high transactional inside sales, that the SDRs sort of fall into one of three paths. And sort of to your point, one is they get burned out after a certain period of time, and the conversions start dropping, and then they get fired. Or especially if they can't remediate the difficulty, whatever psychological challenge or whatever challenge it is. Secondly, they're able to hang on for 12 months at some sort of level, and then they get promoted to SDR manager. Or they hang on for 12 months, and then the next new bright, shiny object comes into view, and they jump.
Well, and I've talked with 3 or 4 SDRs on the show at this point. So these are top SDRs, and the most successful SDRs are the most creative SDRs. I mean, I've talked to the top SDR at SalesLoft, which was very meta, and very, very creative, and talked to the top sales SDR at Vidyard and how they're using their Viewed It kind of video product, which is incredibly unique, right?
I love that product.
This is true personalization where this can't be canned. I've got a picture with a whiteboard with your name on it, Andy, and I'm gonna leave a message for you that is short and relevant and truly personalized, and that really stands out because we'll never say never, because I guess there are ways that it could be possible, but that's not going to get automated and built into some type of a spam cannon. I think that's why they're seeing like outrageous. I mean, they're seeing like 8x improved open rates when you do that. But oh my gosh, it takes a little bit of extra work to do that.
Yeah. So you're not going to have the same number of quote unquote dials, right? But they each could be more effective. And
exactly.
That's the part of the equation that seems like not the good companies, like SalesLoft and so on. Clearly, they're getting at Vidyard, but the great mass of companies that are trying to do this, they don't get it, right? Their managers are just saying, "Here's the number, do the number." And it's sort of, I always think of Karl Marx, the Communist Manifesto is, workers of the world unite. You have nothing to lose but your chains. I don't feel like sometimes like SDRs, that's sort of the predicament some of them are in some companies is, time for a little uprising.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think those are the same organizations where there is no career path, right? It is, we're just going to either run you into the ground or maybe somehow you get to manage running other people into the ground.
Until you run both in the ground, right?
Exactly. But it's the places. And again, I think you can look to those same companies. You can look at SalesLoft, and you can look at Vidyard, you can look at Vision Critical and the other folks that I've talked to in that space. And nearly all of those folks are progressing into a field sales role. Like they've had an opportunity to prove themselves, to get some skills along the way, to really truly partner with the folks that are in the field that they're getting meetings for, and develop themselves and become something more. That is something to live for.
Yeah. Well, I ran into somebody at a company that I won't name, that the guy had been SDR there for 7 years.
Oh my God.
And having a good time and doing a great job. But I brought that up to a VP of sales for another company that had a similar sales model, and he was appalled. It never occurred to him that this could be a career. And that's the thing that sort of gets me is, we train people, but the way that so many companies implement the SDR function, as you sort of alluded to earlier, it's meant to grind people up and spit them out, and there's going to be a few left standing, and we promote them into management or field sales. But everybody else, right? They're gone.
Yeah. Well, and there's something wrong with that, right? Why can't being an SDR be a career unto itself? That's such a valuable function.
Absolutely.
Why can't somebody be the best at the world at that and do it for 10 years?
Exactly. But this, and I've had that reaction not just from this individual, but from multiple people, just thought that's crazy. And I'm like, no, it's the opposite of crazy. It's incredibly sane. I mean, hopefully they're paying that guy a ton of money, because if he's doing that well, they stuck around for 7 years in the environment that he's in. Yeah. Make sure the guy's well compensated.
Yeah, absolutely. As long as he's not part of your middle class. I like that. I like that.
Yeah. I don't know. My impression was from talking to him and talking to his management team is, he was above quota. So, okay. So let's see. So our last one then is you're talking about these people are good at orienting themselves around goals and coming up with the habits and routines and actions to make them happen. So I guess question for you is really what comes first, the goals or the habits?
That's probably a catch-22. I mean, that's a chicken or egg question. I think that in this set of top performers, they go hand in hand. They've done the goals before. They understand that just having a goal isn't enough to get there. And again, Robbie Siegel was a great one to talk about this, and he referenced a book that is now escaping me. I'll put it in some notes for you. In fact, Andy, what I'll do is I'll put together a little page for your audience. If folks go to top1.fm/Andy, I will be sure to include some of the appropriate clips that we reference,
great.
and I'll find whatever this book was. But he talked about it's not even habits aren't enough, and the guidance that he got was really around. It's about the routines that oftentimes we settle into. It's not we've designed a routine. It's just kind of the way things happen, right? Like, well, my kids go to school at this time, and therefore these other things happen, and you just sort of settle into it. But rather taking a much, much more proactive approach. And he was just all about how do I wring every ounce out of selling time.
Mm-hmm.
So that I can perform in that time. And he is also one of the absolutely most well-rounded guys I've ever talked to. The guy was really fit. We got a chance to have the conversation in person while I was at a conference in Vegas. So really fit guy. You could tell that his priority was his family. And he spent the time there with them. And at the same time was just absolutely delivering from a revenue perspective and just his level of performance. And it was just all about optimizing everything that he did so that he could maximize that time that he had that was designated for selling.
Yeah, well, couple interesting things there. One is if people haven't read, and again, a book I love, I refer to on the show quite often, The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg. Really should, because a little bit to your point is what he lays out, which I think is really the truth, is that habits really are routines. And they're a process, that people tend to look at as sort of this monolithic thing, but actually it is a process. And so I think that having the habits are what enable you to dream. Right? That's your confidence. Your confidence is built on confidence in knowing that you have these habits that enable you to achieve what you want to achieve. So I always, that's why I ask the question about goals and habits, because I think fundamentally you sort of have to have the habits first, and then you get the goals. But but be that as may. But to the other point that you had, I think is really one that I've been spending more time thinking about, and is that you talked about he spends the time with his family, and he's with them. Is I think one of the things that's happened when we sort of have blurred the lines between personal and professional lives from a time, we talk about work-life integration and so on, is I think it takes some of the pressure off optimizing the time that you've got set aside for work. So that what we're seeing is part of the reason that we're seeing people so comfortable to some degree with this, blurring of the lines between work and play, is that, they don't have to be quite as much under pressure during those sort of defined work hours, because they know it's just going to morph into a larger, blob of time that's that sometimes it's work, sometimes it's play. Right? I think the people that really set aside the work time, they've got an incentive to make sure they're really optimizing how they utilize that time, because there is no more.
I think that ties back so perfectly to where we started, right? We talked about the overwhelm, and instead of spending all of your time halfway doing whatever it is you're doing, I'm half working, I'm half playing, I'm half engaged with my family, and whichever one of those is in the lead. What if you did just one of those things all the way for that period of time, and then set that aside and did the next thing? And the other thing I'll talk about, probably the best book that I read about a year ago, was by Jocko Willink, and it was called Extreme Ownership. And Jocko was one of the most decorated Navy SEAL commanders in Navy history. Was running all the Fallujah, Iraq stuff. So saw a lot of crazy stuff happen. And this book is mind-boggling. And the thing for me that absolutely stuck out of that book is he talks about discipline equals freedom. And he says, this is the military, right? So you have like very extraordinarily well-defined, this is the standard operating procedure. This is what we do. We're going to drill this into you until it is part of your subconscious. And at that point, it's muscle memory. You know what to do, and that frees up your mind to do that last little bit of creative stuff. And just such an eye-opening concept for me that I've really tried to take to heart. And I think it manifests in a lot of ways. I mean, you hear Steve Jobs only wore the same thing. That's one less decision that he had to make, and that discipline freed him up to do other things.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more with that. I mean, to me, that's I've used that phrase multiple times. That discipline is freedom. I haven't read the book, and I will pick it up. But yeah, one of the sort of exemplifications of that is I don't know if you ever read any of Stephen Ambrose's books about World War II, oral histories. Band of Brothers was one of his, and Citizen Soldiers, and about D-Day. And people are saying that one of the differences with the U.S. soldiers versus the enemy combatants they were fighting at that time was that the U.S. soldiers are so well trained and understood, unambiguously what their jobs were, but that when they got into a situation where they had to make decisions for themselves, they made the right decisions and they took the right initiative. They had that ownership, and that starts from a base of discipline.
Yeah, it's such great stuff. I mean, obviously, there's lots we can learn about the military. I was born in Germany. My dad retired as a 2-star general in the Army Reserve. So I believe in it. I think it's really good stuff. I respect anybody that has served us in that way, and thank them a lot. And there's an awful lot we can learn from them because they do a lot of things right.
Oh, they do. Well, I tell people, people ask me, who are my best managers, the best people I ever worked for? And they were both, one was West Point and one was a Naval Academy guy. Far and away, best people managers I'd ever worked for.
Yeah. I can see that for sure. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, Scott, we've run out of time, and it's been great talking to you, as hopefully we'll get a chance to do this again. So tell people how they can learn more about your podcast and you and connect with you.
Yeah. So the easy way, you're listening to a podcast now. So I'm sure you've got a podcast app running. If you will pause this and do a quick search for Sales Success Stories or Scott Ingram, and subscribe. Would love for you to check that out and listen there. Like I said, I'll set up a special page for you, Andy, so we can pull together a few of the special things. I'll put in the link to the books and some of the other things at top1.fm/Andy. And you can obviously surf around from there and learn more about the show and what we're up to. And it's always a pleasure to talk with you.
Likewise. And friends, so Scott, thanks for joining me. Friends, thanks for joining me again on the show today. Please come back, join me again tomorrow. As Scott said, take a minute right now, pause this, use the podcast app on your phone to subscribe to Accelerate, leave us a review. We'd really appreciate it. So thanks again for joining me. Till next time, this is Andy Paul. Good selling, everyone.